I never expected a letter from my dead father to change everything. But there it was, sitting innocently in my mailbox on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, his familiar scrawl unmistakable, even after 5 years. My name is Ria, and until that moment, I'd been living what I thought was a perfectly ordinary life. Teaching Victorian literature to half-interested college students, sharing a comfortable suburban home with my husband Holden, and doing my best to forget the mess my father left behind when he died. "What's that?" Holden asked as I stood frozen in our kitchen, staring at the envelope. He was fixing his usual after-work protein shake, the blender whirring to life before I could answer. "It's from my father," I managed once the noise died down. Holden stopped mid-pour. "That's impossible. Edwin's been dead for years." "I know his handwriting, Holden. I'd recognize it anywhere." The letter had been forwarded through 3 different addresses before finally reaching me. The postmark was dated just days before my father's death. I turned it over in my hands, feeling the weight of whatever secrets it held. "Well," Holden moved closer, his cologne mixing with the artificial strawberry smell of his shake. "Are you going to open it?" I slid my finger under the flap, careful not to tear what might be my father's last words to me. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in his distinctive cursive. "My dearest Rhiannon, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. I know you think you understand what happened, why I lost everything, why I betrayed your trust. But nothing is what it seems. The truth about our family's fortune, about its disappearance, it's all hidden in plain sight. Look deeper. Question everything. Trust no one until you find the green leather journal in my old study. What you discover there will change everything. I'm sorry for the burden I'm placing on you, but you're the only one who can make this right. All my love, Dad." My hands were shaking by the time I finished reading. Holden had moved behind me, reading over my shoulder. "A hidden journal?" He let out a low whistle. "Ria, this could be huge. Your father's estate was worth millions before everything went south. If there's something we missed." I stepped away, suddenly uncomfortable with his proximity. "This isn't about money, Holden. This is about my father trying to tell me something important." Of course, he backpedaled, but I caught the gleam in his eye. "I'm just saying, if there's more to the story of your father's financial collapse, don't you want to know? For closure, if nothing else." I folded the letter carefully, buying time to think. My father's study had been in his old house, the one my mother still lived in, though she'd converted it into a home office years ago. I hadn't set foot in there since the funeral. "I should call Mom," I said, reaching for my phone. Holden's hand covered mine. "Maybe we should think about this first. Figure out a strategy. If there really is something valuable hidden away." "It's just a journal," I interrupted, but even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. My father had been many things: a gambler, a risk-taker, sometimes even a fool, but he'd never been one to exaggerate. If he said this would change everything, he meant it. "I'll go see Mom tomorrow," I decided. "Alone." Holden's jaw tightened slightly, but he nodded. "Whatever you think is best, honey." That night, I lay awake long after Holden's breathing had evened out beside me. My father's words kept repeating in my head. Trust no one. Question everything. What had he discovered in those final days before his death? And why wait 5 years to tell me? I turned toward the window, watching shadows from passing cars dance across our bedroom ceiling. Something told me I was about to uncover secrets that some people would prefer stayed buried. The next morning, I pulled into my mother's driveway, noticing how the once pristine garden had grown wild since Dad's death. Mom had always said gardening was his thing, not hers. I found her in the kitchen, already dressed for work in one of her signature power suits, sipping coffee and scrolling through her phone. "This is a surprise," she said, not looking up. "Especially at 7 in the morning. I got a letter from Dad yesterday." The phone clattered onto the counter. "Excuse me." I pulled out the letter and handed it to her. Her hands trembled slightly as she read it, her expression shifting from shock to something darker. "The green leather journal," she muttered. Of course he'd mentioned that now. "You know about it?" She set the letter down carefully, smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle. "Your father kept meticulous records of everything in that journal. His investments, his debts, his suspicions." "Suspicions about what?" Before she could answer, The front door opened. "Hello? Anyone home?" I recognized Sylvia's voice immediately. My mother-in-law had perfect timing, as always. "We're in the kitchen," Mom called out, her professional mask sliding back into place. "Having coffee." Sylvia appeared in the doorway, elegant as ever in her designer clothes. "Rhea, darling, Holden mentioned you might be here. He was so worried when you left without saying goodbye this morning." I hadn't left without saying goodbye. I left a note, just like I always did. "What brings you by, Sylvia? Can't a mother-in-law check on her family?" She moved to the coffee maker, helping herself as if she owned the place. "Especially when there might be exciting news about an inheritance?" My stomach dropped. Of course Holden had told her everything. "There's no inheritance," Mom said sharply. "Just some old papers Edwin wanted Rhea to see." "But surely there must be something," Sylvia pressed. "Edwin was too clever to lose everything." Holden always said dash. "Holden doesn't know what he's talking about," Mom cut in. "He wasn't there." The tension in the room thickened. I watched Sylvia's perfectly manicured fingers tighten around her coffee cup. "Well," she said finally, "perhaps we should let Rhea look through Edwin's study herself." "That's why you're here, isn't it, dear?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Something about the way she'd said it made my skin crawl. "I'll show you up," Mom said, standing quickly. "Sylvia, I'm sure you can see yourself out. I have a meeting in an hour." Upstairs, Dad's study looked exactly as I remembered it. Books everywhere, his old leather chair, the massive desk where he'd spent countless nights working. Or so we'd thought. "The journal isn't here," Mom said quietly, closing the door behind us. "I've looked. Many times." "Then where dash?" "Listen to me carefully, Rhea. Your father wasn't just keeping records in that journal. He was building a case. Against someone who betrayed him." "Who?" She shook her head. "I don't know for certain. But whoever it was, they had access to his accounts, his passwords, everything. They systematically destroyed him." A crash from downstairs made us both jump. "Sorry," Sylvia called up. "Just knocked over a vase. I'm leaving now." Mom waited until we heard the front door close. "Be careful who you trust, sweetheart. Even family isn't always what it seems." I thought about Holden's reaction to the letter, his immediate focus on potential money, about Sylvia's unexpected appearance this morning. "Mom," I said slowly, "what exactly did Dad suspect?" She walked to the window, watching Sylvia's car pull away. "That someone close to him was working with an insider at his investment firm. Someone who knew exactly how to make his losses look like bad luck rather than sabotage. And you think dash? I think you should look very carefully at who benefits from you not finding that journal." She turned back to me, her face grim. "And maybe ask yourself why your mother-in-law is so interested in your father's papers." I left my mother's house with more questions than answers, and one certainty. Someone didn't want me finding that journal. And they already knew I was looking for it. I returned to Dad's study that night, after telling Holden I needed to grade papers at the library. The house was dark, Mom away at a late meeting, but I knew where she kept the spare key. Something about my conversation with her earlier hadn't sat right. She knew more than she was saying. The study looked different in the darkness, shadows transforming familiar objects into strange shapes. I ran my fingers along the oak paneling, remembering how Dad used to tap certain sections while deep in thought. That's when I noticed it. One panel sounded hollow. My phone buzzed. "Holden, where are you really?" "Mom saw your car." I ignored it, focusing on the panel. It took several minutes of pressing and prodding before I found the catch. The panel swung open with a soft click, revealing a wall safe I'd never known existed. Another text. "We need to talk about what your mother said." My hands shook as I tried the combination I'd seen Dad use countless times on his briefcase. My birthday. Nothing. Mom's birthday. Nothing. Then I remembered. The day he met Mom. A date he celebrated every year. The safe opened with a quiet hiss. Inside, I found stacks of documents, but no green journal. Instead, there was a manila envelope marked evidence in Dad's handwriting. I pulled it out just as headlights swept across the window. A car door slammed. Then another. "Rhea." Holden's voice carried from downstairs. "Your mom said you might be here." Footsteps on the stairs. Multiple sets. I quickly photographed several pages from the envelope, my heart pounding as I skimmed their contents. Investment records, bank transfers, emails between Dad and someone named SM, discussing confidential account information. Sylvia Mercer? The study light is on. Sylvia's voice drifted up. I told you she'd be snooping around up here. I shoved everything back into the safe, hands fumbling with the panel. It wouldn't close properly. The door opened. Holden stood there, Sylvia right behind him. "What are you doing?" he asked, but his tone suggested he already knew. "I could ask you the same thing." I stepped away from the wall, trying to block their view of the panel. "How did you know I was here?" "Your mother called me," Sylvia said smoothly. "She was worried about you, coming here alone at night. Weren't you, Margot?" Mom appeared in the doorway, her face unreadable. "I thought we agreed to look together tomorrow, Rhea." Something was wrong. Mom would never have called Sylvia. "Did you find what you were looking for?" Holden moved closer, his eyes scanning the room. "The mysterious journal?" "There is no journal," I lied. "Just some old papers." "Don't lie to me." The sharpness in his voice made me flinch. He'd never spoken to me like that before. "I know there's more. There has to be." "Holden, dear," Sylvia touched his arm. "Remember what we discussed." I looked at Mom, hoping for some sign, some explanation. She gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head. "Why don't we all go downstairs?" Sylvia suggested. "Have some tea, talk this through like family." "Great idea," I said, edging toward the door. "I'll just grab my bag dash." Holden caught my arm. "What's in your pocket?" The envelope corner was peeking out of my jacket. I hadn't closed the safe properly, hadn't hidden the evidence, hadn't seen this coming. "Nothing," I said, but he was already reaching for it. "Holden," Mom's voice cut through the tension. "Let her go." He hesitated, and in that moment, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Desperation. Fear. The look of a man who knew his secrets were about to be exposed. I yanked free and pushed past them all, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Behind me, I heard Sylvia's sharp intake of breath, Holden calling my name, Mom saying something I couldn't make out. I made it to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror, Holden and Sylvia in heated discussion. Mom watching me drive away with an expression that looked almost like pride. The photos I'd taken were burning a hole in my phone. Whatever was in those documents, whatever truth they revealed, I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't trust anyone anymore. Not even my own husband. I spent the night in a cheap motel, examining the photos I'd taken. Each document revealed another layer of betrayal. The emails between Dad and SM showed a pattern, confidential information about Dad's investments being shared, always just before massive losses. But it was the last email that made my blood run cold. "Everything is arranged. H will handle the final transfer. He doesn't suspect." "Ush." "Holden." My phone had been buzzing all night. Missed calls from Holden. Texts from Sylvia expressing concern. Even Mom had tried reaching me, but I couldn't risk talking to anyone yet. Not until I understood what I was dealing with. At dawn, I drove to my office at the university, needing somewhere familiar to think. But when I unlocked my door, Holden was already there, sitting at my desk. "Jesus." I stumbled backward. "How did you dash?" "Your department secretary knows me." He stood slowly. "We need to talk, Rhea. About how you helped steal my father's money?" His face tightened. "Is that what you think you found? You don't understand what really happened. Then explain it to me." I stayed in the doorway, ready to run if needed. "Explain why your mother was emailing my father about account transfers right before he lost everything. My mother was trying to help him." Holden ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I'd always found endearing before. Now it just looked calculated. Edwin was gambling again. He was going to lose everything anyway. We just redirected some assets. Protected them. Protected them for who? He moved toward me, and I backed into the hallway. "For you, Rhea. For us. Your father was sick, making crazy investments. Mom and I saved what we could. By stealing it. By securing it." His voice echoed off the empty corridor walls. "Everything I did was for us. Why can't you see that?" A door opened down the hall. Professor Chen poked her head out, frowning. Everything okay, Rhea? Fine, I said quickly. Just a family discussion. Holden lowered his voice. Let's go home. I'll show you the accounts, prove everything's still there. We can access it together now. The pieces clicked into place. That's why you married me, isn't it? You needed my signature to access whatever you and Sylvia hid. Don't be ridiculous. I love you. Where's the journal, Holden? He blinked. What? Dad's green leather journal. The one that would show exactly what you and Sylvia did. Where is it? His silence was answer enough. Professor Mercer? My student Amanda appeared behind me, clutching papers. About the Victorian lit assignment. Office hours are cancelled, I said, not taking my eyes off Holden. In fact, I'm taking a leave of absence. Rhea, don't dash. I'm going to find that journal. I cut him off. And when I do, I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you and your mother did. You're making a mistake. His charm vanished, replaced by something colder. Think about what you're risking. Your career, your marriage, everything we've built. You mean everything you've stolen? He grabbed my arm. Listen to me, Dash. Let go. Professor Chin was suddenly beside us, her small frame radiating authority. Or I'm calling campus security. Holden released me, straightening his tie. This isn't over. Actually, it is. I pulled off my wedding ring and dropped it at his feet. Tell your mother I said hello. I walked away, my steps echoing in the quiet hallway, feeling his eyes on my back. My phone buzzed again, a text from Mom. Don't go home. Meet me at the cafe on 4th. I know where Dad hid the journal. For the first time since finding Dad's letter, I smiled. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning. The cafe on 4th was nearly empty when I arrived. Mom sat in the back corner, a manila folder on the table in front of her. She looked tired, older somehow, than she had just yesterday. You're being followed, she said as I sat down. Black SUV, 2 cars back. I know. Holden's college roommate works as a private investigator now. I kept my voice steady, though my hands shook as I reached for the coffee she'd ordered me. Where's the journal? Not here. She slid the folder across the table. But these might help explain why your father hid it where he did. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Dad at various charity events with Sylvia Mercer, looking far more intimate than family friends should. Dad and Holden in heated discussion outside his office. Bank statements showing massive transfers to offshore accounts. He was having an affair with Sylvia? Mom's laugh was bitter. No. She wanted him to think she was interested. It was part of their plan. Get close to him, gain his trust, then destroy him. But why? Because of what he discovered about Holden's firm. They were running a Ponzi scheme, using client funds to cover massive losses. Your father was going to expose them. A waitress approached. Mom fell silent until she'd passed. The journal, I pressed. Where is it? Think, Rhea. Where did your father take you every Sunday after your piano lessons? The memory hit me like a physical force. The botanical gardens. The rose maze. She nodded. There's a maintenance shed at the center. The journal is dash. The cafe door chimed. Sylvia walked in, followed by 2 men in suits. Don't react, Mom whispered. Take the back exit. I'll handle this. I slid out of the booth just as Sylvia spotted us. Rhea, darling, what a coincidence. She was just leaving, Mom said smoothly. Academic emergency. Oh, but these gentlemen from the SEC would love to talk to her about Edwin's missing funds. Apparently, some interesting transfers were made recently using his old accounts. I froze. The men in suits moved to block the back exit. That's impossible, I said. Those accounts were closed years ago. Sylvia's smile was predatory. Unless someone recently gained access. Someone with his password records. Someone who's been snooping around his old office. The implications hit me. They were setting me up to take the fall. Miss Mercer, one of the suits stepped forward. We'd like you to come with us to answer some questions. She's not going anywhere. Mom stood, her voice steel. Not without her lawyer present. And I have some interesting documents the SEC might want to see about Holden Mercer's investment practices. Documents can be forged, Sylvia said softly. Just like signatures on transfer forms. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. The garden closes at 5. Don't be late. Fine, I said suddenly. I'll answer your questions. Tomorrow morning at my lawyer's office. The suits exchanged glances. Sylvia's smile faltered. That won't be Dash. It's either tomorrow with my lawyer, or you can arrest me right now and explain to the press why you're investigating the victim instead of the perpetrators. Mom's slight nod told me I'd made the right call. Tomorrow then, the first suit said. 10 a.m. Don't leave town. I walked out the front door, past Sylvia's perfectly composed face, feeling her eyes boring into my back. It was 3:45 p.m. I had just over an hour to get to the botanical gardens and find the journal before they realized what I was doing. My phone buzzed again. They'll figure it out soon. Hurry. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew who it had to be. Dad had always been good at planning ahead, at seeing the long game. Now I just had to prove I was worthy of his trust. The black SUV pulled out behind me as I drove away from the cafe. Let them follow. The Rose Maze had a dozen entrances and twice as many dead ends. By the time they figured out which path I'd taken, I'd have what I came for. I just hoped the journal would be worth all this. The maintenance shed stood before me, exactly as I remembered it from those Sunday afternoons with Dad. But I wasn't alone. Holden was already there, the green leather journal in his hands. Looking for this? He held it up, his silhouette dark against the setting sun. Your father always did love his little puzzles. How did you know where to find it? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Because Edwin told me. Right before he died. He thought he could trust me to make things right. The irony hit like a physical blow. And instead you helped destroy him. I tried to save him. Holden's voice cracked. The firm was going under. Mom and I had a plan to protect everyone's assets, but Edwin wouldn't listen. He was going to expose everything, ruin thousands of lives. So you ruined his instead. We gave him a choice. Sylvia's voice came from behind me. I turned to find her blocking the path back to the maze. He chose poorly. My phone buzzed. Mom, SEC agents heading your way. Get out now. It wasn't just about the money, was it? I said, pieces clicking into place. Dad found something else in those accounts. Something worse than fraud. Holden's grip on the journal tightened. You don't understand what's at stake. Then explain it to me. I took a step forward. Help me understand why my husband betrayed me. Don't, Sylvia warned, but Holden was already shaking his head. I never betrayed you, Rhea. Everything I did was to protect us. The firm wasn't just running a Ponzi scheme. We were laundering money for some very dangerous people. Your father discovered it, and they wanted him silenced. So you orchestrated his financial ruin instead? It was that or they'd kill him. The journal trembled in his hands. I loved you too much to let you lose him that way. Sirens wailed in the distance. Sylvia moved closer, her designer heels sinking into the soft earth. Give her the journal, Holden. Let her see for herself. He hesitated, then tossed it to me. The leather was warm, worn smooth by years of handling. I opened it to find most pages had been torn out. Only the last entry remained. My dearest Rhea, if you're reading this, then everything has gone according to their plan. But remember what I taught you about chess. Sometimes you have to sacrifice your queen to win the game. The real evidence isn't here. It's where we shared our last cup of tea. Love, Dad. Our last cup of tea. The memory hit me. The hospital cafeteria, the day before he died. He'd insisted on using his own tea bag, had fiddled with it longer than necessary. The sirens were closer now. Holden reached for me. Rhea, please, Don't touch me. I backed away, clutching the journal. You let me believe he died from stress and shame, that his heart attack was his own fault. It was mercy, Sylvia said softly. Better than the alternative. Red and blue lights flashed at the maze entrance. We were out of time. The SEC will find those transfers from your father's accounts, Holden warned. They'll arrest you unless we work together. Let me help you one last time. I looked at my husband, this man I'd loved, who'd played me so perfectly. At Sylvia, who'd orchestrated it all. At the journal that held nothing but one final riddle. No, I said. I don't need your help anymore. I turned and ran, not toward the maze entrance where the agents waited, but toward the garden's service exit. Behind me, I heard Holden call my name, heard Sylvia's sharp command to stop me. But I knew something they didn't. Dad's last cup of tea, the tea bag he'd fiddled with so carefully. It wasn't just tea he'd left in that hospital cafeteria. I just had to hope it was still there, and that I could reach it before they caught me. Because if I was wrong, I'd just thrown away my last chance at freedom. The sirens screamed closer as darkness fell, and somewhere in the growing shadows, I heard Holden's footsteps following mine. The hospital cafeteria was exactly as I remembered it: fluorescent lights, plastic chairs, the lingering smell of burnt coffee. At midnight, it was nearly empty except for a few exhausted nurses. And Holden, who'd followed me here. "It's over, Rhea," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "The SEC agents are on their way. Whatever you think your father left here, it's not worth throwing your life away." I stared at the vending machine where Dad and I had sat 5 years ago. "Tell me something, Holden. Did you marry me before or after you helped kill my father?" "He had a heart attack, Dash. After discovering his son-in-law was helping criminals launder money." I kept my voice steady, though my hands shook. "After you and Sylvia trapped him in a corner. We gave him options. You gave him a death sentence." I stood, moving toward the vending machine. Either way, he'd lose everything. His reputation, his family, his freedom. The heart attack was just more convenient for everyone. Holden followed me. "You don't understand. These people, they don't just destroy lives, they end them. I was protecting you. By lying to me for 5 years? By watching me grieve, blame myself for not seeing his depression." My voice cracked. "That's not protection, Holden. That's torture." The vending machine hummed softly. "Same spot, 3rd row back." Dad's voice echoed in my memory. "Sometimes the best hiding place is right in plain sight." "Mom's here with the FBI," I said quietly. "She's been working with them for months, building a case." "Did you know that?" His face paled. "You're bluffing. The SEC investigation is just a cover. They needed you and Sylvia to think you were still in control." I reached into the vending machine's return slot, feeling along the back edge where Dad had fiddled with his tea bag. But Dad knew. He knew someone would eventually follow the money trail. "Rhea, please, Dash." My fingers found the small USB drive, taped exactly where Dad had left it. "Everything's here, isn't it? The account numbers, the client list, the real reason the firm couldn't let him expose the truth." Holden lunged for me, but I was already backing away. "Give me the drive." "Or what? You'll destroy me like you destroyed him." "I loved you." His composure cracked. "Everything I did was to build a future for us." "No." I heard footsteps approaching from both corridors. "Everything you did was to save yourself." FBI agents emerged from one hallway, Mom and local police from the other. Sylvia appeared behind them, already in handcuffs. "It's done," Mom said. "We have their servers, their backup files, everything." Holden's shoulders slumped. "You don't know what they'll do to me in prison." "Actually, I do." I held out the USB drive to the FBI agent. "Because Dad left me more than just account numbers. He left me the names of everyone involved, including the people you were really afraid of. The ones who thought they were untouchable." "That's impossible," Sylvia breathed. "He couldn't have known, Dash. He knew everything." I finally met Holden's eyes. He just needed someone they wouldn't suspect to finish what he started. Someone they thought they'd already broken. As they led Holden away, he turned back one last time. "I really did love you." "I know," I said. "That's what made it so easy to fool you." Later, Mom found me still sitting in the cafeteria, staring at Dad's old spot. "You okay?" He thought he was protecting me by keeping me in the dark. Just like Holden thought he was protecting me by lying. I looked up at her. "Why does everyone think protection means control?" She squeezed my shoulder. "Because it's easier than trusting someone to be strong on their own." I touched the empty vending machine slot one last time. "Dad trusted me." "Yes," she smiled. "He did. And look what you did with that trust." The fluorescent lights flickered as dawn approached, casting shadows that finally began to fade. 6 months later, I stood in Dad's study, packing the last of his books. The trial had ended yesterday. Holden and Sylvia both took plea deals in exchange for testimony against the firm's bigger players. Mom had finally decided to sell the house. "Found something you might want to see," she said from the doorway, holding a familiar green leather journal. It was behind the safe all along. I took it carefully, but Holden had the journal at the garden. "A copy." Your father left several, each with different clues. She smiled. He knew someone would try to use it against you eventually. The real journal was filled with Dad's actual thoughts, not just financial records. I opened to the last entry, dated 3 days before his death. My dearest Ria, by now you'll understand why I had to leave these breadcrumbs. Not for revenge. Revenge is a poison that kills the holder first. No, this was about justice and about showing you your own strength. You were never the quiet bookworm Holden thought he married. You're your mother's daughter and my heir in all the ways that matter. I'm sorry for the pain this path will cause you, but I trust you'll understand why it was necessary. A knock interrupted my reading. Professor Chin stood in the doorway, looking uncertain. The faculty meeting's in an hour, she said. If you still want to present your proposal. I nodded. After everything, returning to teaching had felt impossible. But Dad's journal had given me an idea. I'll be there. I turned to Mom. You're sure about this? Using the settlement money to start a financial literacy program for at-risk students? Edwin would have loved it. She squeezed my hand. It's the perfect way to honor his real legacy. As I gathered my things, a letter slid from the journal, newer, the envelope addressed in Holden's handwriting. I'd been avoiding his messages from prison. You don't have to read it, Mom said. But I did. I owed myself that much closure. Ria, I finally understand what your father meant about protection versus trust. I thought I was protecting you by controlling the situation, just like my mother always controlled me. But Edwin trusted you to be stronger than either of us imagined. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you've taught me something about real strength. Maybe that's the inheritance Edwin meant for all of us to find. Ush. I folded the letter carefully. He still doesn't get it, does he? Dad's inheritance was never about money or revenge. No, Mom agreed. It was about breaking cycles. About choosing truth over comfort, growth over protection. Professor Chin cleared her throat. The students are waiting. I looked around the study one last time. The empty safe, the packed boxes, the shadows that had held so many secrets. They all seemed smaller now, less threatening. You know what's funny? I said, picking up my proposal for the financial literacy program. All those years Dad spent teaching me chess, and I never realized he was really teaching me about life. Sometimes you have to sacrifice what you thought you wanted to find what you actually need. And what did you need? Professor Chin asked. I touched the journal one last time before placing it in Mom's hands. To understand that inheritance isn't just what we receive, it's what we choose to pass on. As we left the study, I caught a glimpse of the garden through the window. The roses were blooming again, their shadows stretching toward the maze where everything had finally unraveled. But shadows don't seem so dark once you've learned to see through them. Ready? Mom asked, holding out my old office keys. I took them, feeling their familiar weight. Ready. The future stretched ahead, no longer shadowed by the past but illuminated by it. Dad had given me more than just clues to follow. He'd given me the courage to forge my own path. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all. We locked the study door one final time, leaving the shadows behind.